Michael Faraday was never meant to matter, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he lacked permission. He was born into a world where knowledge had gates, and every one of them was closed to people like him. No university halls, no inherited status, no mentors waiting to be impressed, only work. As a child, Faraday learned early what society expected from him: obedience, labor, and silence. Education was not something he was offered. It was something he watched from the outside, through windows he was never invited to enter. Books were not tools of learning for him. They were objects of distance, symbols of a life reserved for others. By the time he became a bookbinder's apprentice, Faraday had already internalized the truth the world kept repeating to him: "You are not one of us." Day after day, he stitched together volumes written by men whose names carried authority, men who spoke confidently about nature, forces, and laws, all while Faraday's hands absorbed their words through glue and leather. He was close enough to touch knowledge, but never close enough to claim it. No one asked what he thought. No one expected him to understand. And that was precisely where something dangerous began. Faraday read obsessively, not casually, desperately. He copied passages by hand, rewrote ideas in his own words, and tested understanding not through conversation, but through isolation. There was no guidance, no curriculum, only curiosity colliding with exclusion. In academic circles, Faraday did not exist, and when he finally appeared awkward, self-taught, lacking the language of formal education, he was treated accordingly. He did not speak like them. He did not dress like them. He did not belong. His ideas were received politely, then dismissed quietly, not argued against, ignored. Because ignorance, in elite spaces, is not always about lack of knowledge. Sometimes it is about lack of credentials. Faraday was living proof of an uncomfortable possibility, that understanding might emerge without permission. And institutions do not fear wrong ideas nearly as much as they fear uncontrolled ones. To the educated world, Faraday was a risk not because he challenged facts, but because he challenged the system that decided who was allowed to produce them. He was too earnest, too direct, too untrained. In other words, unacceptable. At this stage of his life, success was not just unlikely. It was unthinkable. The rules of science were clear, even if they were never written down. You must be taught. You must be certified. You must be recognized. Faraday was none of these things. And yet, quietly, relentlessly, the ideas inside him refused to stay small. This was not the beginning of a triumph. It was the beginning of tension. Because when someone without education begins to understand the world deeply, the question is no longer what they know, but why they were never meant to know it. Faraday did not learn the way others learned. There were no lectures guiding him forward, no professors correcting his mistakes, no structure to lean on when understanding failed, only silence and repetition. He worked all day with his hands, performing the tasks expected of him. And at night, when the city slowed and exhaustion claimed most people, Faraday began his real work. He read the same pages again and again, not because they were easy, but because they were not. Each sentence demanded effort, each concept resisted him, and without guidance, confusion had nowhere to go. So it stayed. Mistakes were not corrected. They accumulated. Ideas formed slowly, painfully through trial rather than instruction. Faraday learned not by certainty, but by persistence. This kind of learning is lonely. There was no one to tell him when he was close or when he was wrong. No reassurance, no praise, only the quiet fear that perhaps he was misunderstanding everything. But quitting would have meant accepting the world's verdict. So he continued. Faraday built understanding the same way he built books, carefully, repeatedly, by hand. He copied diagrams he barely grasped. He repeated experiments that failed more often than they succeeded, and each failure carried weight, not just intellectual, but emotional. Because when you teach yourself, every error feels personal. The obsession deepened. Faraday began to see patterns where others saw chaos, connections where no one had pointed them out. His mind, untrained but unrestrained, moved freely, sometimes too freely. This freedom came at a cost. He slept less. He isolated more. The world around him narrowed until only ideas remained. Learning was no longer preparation for a future. It was survival in the present. And yet, something remarkable was happening beneath the exhaustion. Faraday was not merely absorbing knowledge, he was reshaping it. Without formal rules to follow, he questioned assumptions others had inherited without thought. He approached problems without respect for hierarchy, because he had never been taught to respect it. What institutions would later call insight began here, in disorder, doubt, and relentless solitude. But at this stage, no one noticed. To the outside world, Faraday was still just a bookbinder, still uneducated, still invisible. The difference was internal. He was becoming someone the system did not know how to classify, and systems fear what they cannot categorize. Faraday did not announce himself. He did not demand attention. He did not claim authority. He was noticed by accident. His notes careful, obsessive, handwritten without formal structure, began to circulate quietly. Not because they were polished, but because they were different. They asked questions others did not bother to ask. They connected ideas that were usually kept apart, and that made some people curious. For the first time, Faraday found himself in rooms he was never meant to enter, not as an equal, but as an exception, an anomaly to be examined. They listened, not with trust, but with evaluation. Faraday spoke plainly, too plainly. He lacked the language of academic confidence. He did not dress the part. He did not soften his uncertainty with prestige. And in places where status mattered more than clarity, this made him uncomfortable to watch. His ideas were met with silence, not rejection, something worse, polite distance. Because acknowledging him fully would have meant acknowledging the possibility that understanding could exist without formal education, that intelligence might emerge outside the approved path, and institutions are built to prevent that idea from spreading. Faraday sensed it immediately. The air changed when he spoke. Interest flickered, then cooled. Conversations moved on. His presence became conditional, useful, but not welcome. He was allowed to contribute, but not to belong, to assist, but not to lead, to be close enough to serve, but never close enough to shape direction. This is how class reveals itself not through insults, but through limits. Faraday was learning a new lesson now, not about nature, but about people, about how systems protect themselves by controlling access, not information. He did not push back. He absorbed the tension instead, watched carefully, adjusted where necessary, not to please, but to survive within spaces that could close just as easily as they had opened. This partial recognition was dangerous. It suggested hope without offering security. Faraday stood at a threshold where many lose themselves too visible to retreat, too foreign to advance, and the cost of standing there was constant self-doubt. Was he truly understood, or merely tolerated? The world had begun to see him, but it had not yet decided what to do with him. And for someone like Faraday, that uncertainty was more threatening than rejection. Recognition did come, slowly, carefully, as if the world needed time to convince itself that Faraday's mind could no longer be ignored. His work began to circulate beyond whispers. Invitations arrived. His name appeared in places it never had before. Institutions that once overlooked him now spoke of him with measured respect. But respect is not the same as belonging. Faraday was welcomed into rooms he had once only imagined, yet he entered them marked. not by failure, but by origin. His lack of formal education did not disappear with recognition. It followed him, quietly shaping every interaction. He was praised for his results, but questioned for his methods, valued for his usefulness, but never fully trusted. Others spoke with authority. Faraday spoke with care. He listened more than he interrupted. He deferred where others asserted, not because he lacked confidence in his understanding, but because he understood the fragility of his position. This was conditional acceptance, a narrow path where one misstep could return him to invisibility. Titles were offered, but status was withheld. His ideas were embraced, but his voice remained restrained. Faraday had entered the institution, but not its inner circle, and he knew it. He watched as men with less insight, but greater pedigree shaped discussions he could not steer. He saw how language, accent, and manner mattered as much as discovery. This was not bitterness, it was clarity. Faraday understood that science did not exist outside society, it reflected it. Knowledge could be admired, but hierarchy would still decide who was allowed to lead. So he chose a different path. Instead of fighting for authority, he focused on understanding. Instead of seeking dominance, he deepened precision. If the world would not grant him power, he would make power irrelevant. This decision would define him. Faraday did not rise by becoming louder. He rose by becoming undeniable. And yet, even as his influence grew, one truth remained unchanged. He was inside the system, but he would never fully belong to it. Faraday could have changed. The doors were finally open. The recognition was real. Authority was within reach. He had every reason to claim it. Others in his position did. They reshaped themselves to fit expectation. They learned the language of dominance. They used discovery as leverage, a way to climb, to command, to be remembered. Faraday chose something else. He never learned to speak down to others, never learned to turn knowledge into control. Power made him uneasy, not because he lacked ambition, but because he understood its cost. For Faraday, science was not a ladder, it was a responsibility. He refused titles that would distance him from understanding. He declined honors that demanded conformity, not publicly, not dramatically, but quietly, consistently. This refusal was not humility as performance, it was conviction. Faraday believed that knowledge did not belong to institutions or individuals, it belonged to the world, and the moment it became a tool of dominance, it stopped being truth. This made him difficult, not rebellious, inconvenient, because systems prefer ambition they can reward, not integrity they cannot control. Faraday taught as he discovered, plainly, patiently, without spectacle. He spoke to students, not to hierarchies. He explained ideas so they could be understood, not admired. To some, this made him invisible again, but invisibility no longer frightened him. He had seen what power demanded in exchange for acceptance, and he had decided the price was too high. Faraday remained inside the system without surrendering himself to it. A rare position, unstable, but honest. He would never dominate science, but science would never escape his influence. And that, he believed, was enough. Faraday never tried to be remembered. He did not shape his work for legacy. He did not speak in a way meant to echo through history. He did not ask the world to carry his name forward. And yet it did. The forces he uncovered moved quietly, invisibly, just like him. They did not announce themselves. They did not demand attention. But they reshaped everything they touched. Homes filled with light. Cities began to hum. Distance collapsed. None of it required his presence. Faraday understood something rare, that the most powerful changes are not always loud. They do not arrive with applause. They arrive slowly, embedding themselves so deeply into everyday life that we forget they were ever discovered. He remained the same man he had always been, cautious of authority, careful with truth, uninterested in dominance. While others chased recognition, Faraday continued to ask questions, not to conquer nature, but to understand it. He never confused knowledge with ownership. He never believed discovery gave him the right to command. And because of that, his work outlived ambition. Long after he was gone, his ideas remained stripped of his name, woven into the structure of the world. That was his quiet victory. Faraday did not win by rising above others. He won by refusing to stand on them. And in a world that often rewards noise over depth, his life leaves behind a difficult question. If power fades and titles disappear, what remains? Sometimes the answer is simple: understanding.